We're going up and down, over and over, over and over. It's the same old thing. Up and down, over and under.
Well, Dr. Breus, welcome to the show. Excited to have you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. We're going to talk about sleep, energy, exercise, all of it.
Absolutely. I love it. And, for anyone who's been listening to this podcast, I just got done telling you my focus this year is sleep. I've got three. It's a huge deal.
Big deal.
Well, and it's funny. So my wife and I have three kids.
Okay.
Our
How
youngest
old?
is 7, 4, 2.5.
Oof. You are in the thick of it, brother.
I mean, we're in survival mode. We're
You
in survival
totally
mode.
are. If you figure out your kids' chronotypes, it actually makes stuff much easier.
Oh, interesting. Wait, so you could they could even have varying chronotypes that would show themselves at this young of an age?
So actually, everybody goes through all of the chronotypes as we develop, and then you kind of set when you hit adulthood. So like your itty bitty ones will be early birds or lions. Then your middle ones will be bears. When they get to teenage years, they'll become wolves.
Right.
And they kind of set, because remember when you were a teenager, you wanted to stay up late and sleep late, which is what a wolf does.
Absolutely. That's okay. It's interesting to think about it in that way. But yeah, so it's funny. Sleep has been such a big priority in our house because our youngest one was a terrible sleeper.
Oh, sorry.
I'm talking, it's our third one and we had to get like a sleep consultant. We needed someone to help us. We had to do the whole thing.
Right.
And it just went on for so long. But, I'm at this point in my life, I'm 35. And I think having all these kids, I was chalking up bad nights of sleep to like, oh, well, the kids woke us up.
Right.
We were up late with the kid or whatever.
Or stress.
Yeah. Well, now the kids are sleeping well and I wasn't. So I'm like, oh man, now I have to dig a little deeper. Like,
maybe.
What's going on here? So, I've talked about it a little bit in past episodes. My big focus is sleep, and I'm making a bunch of life changes. Okay. Coincidentally, one of them is intermittent fasting. So I would love to talk about that. But I was doing a lot of this kind of on my own. Mm-hmm. Being a podcaster, I had the good fortune of getting to talk to like a lot of really interesting people who are experts in their field. So I was trying to incorporate it. Then I stumbled on your book and I was like, oh man, it's all right here. Like this is exactly what I was trying to map out for myself. And he already went and spelled it all out. So cannot wait to kind of talk about this today, introduce folks to your work who maybe aren't aware, because I really think for people who have similar goals, this is just going to be really impactful.
Yeah. So it was kind of a weird scenario. So a sleep doctor writes a book about energy, right? So like, where does that kind of come into play, right? And so I have a co-author. Her name is Stacey Griffith. So for folks who don't know Stacey, she's the founding trainer of Soul Cycle. That's the indoor cycling company. And she and I have been friends for a long time. And she was helping me train, and I was helping her with her sleep. And it was really interesting because we started to realize that our clients had each other's needs, right? So my sleep clients needed more physical movement activity, and then her movement and activity clients needed more sleep. And we were like, there's got to be a relationship here, that we really, and it should be fairly simplistic, fairly straightforward. So what we started doing was thinking about the idea of chronotypes, right? So for folks who don't know what a chronotype is, I'll get into that. But this Energize is my fourth book. My one book previous was called The Power of When, and that was really the kind of the seminal text for me in terms of sort of what I'm kind of putting forward in terms of my theories about how does sleep work. And so it all has to do with the idea of a genetic chronotype. Now, you might not have heard of the term chronotype, but you've actually heard of the concept if you've ever been called an early bird or a night owl, right? Those are chronotypes. So back in the 70s, there was a group of researchers, and they came up with this thing called the MEQ, the Morningness Eveningness Questionnaire, which just basically talked about preferences that people had, morning versus evening, schedules, sleep, things like that. And they started to develop this idea of these kind of chronotypes. turns out that they had early ones, they had late ones. So they called them early birds, they called them night owls, no big deal. For some reason, I have no idea why, they called people in the middle hummingbirds. I have no idea what the history is behind that. It seems pretty stupid to me, but that's what we kind of had. And so now
keeping it in the bird game.
Right, I know, right? So fast forward like into the 2000s where we really started to use these categories of people in psychological and sleep research, because the big thing that we discovered is it's genetic. So you don't actually get to choose if you want to be an early bird or a night owl. Like if you sent me your 23andMe data or your Ancestry.com data, I could turn to you and say, look, right here on the PER3 gene, we can see that if it's longer, you're this, if it's shorter, you're that. So it's all right there in, you know, in the bloodstream, as they say. So that part of it was interesting. And what we also discovered was because let me back up. When you follow your chronotype, everything gets much easier. So follow this example. Let's say you're an early bird and you wake up at 6:30 every morning without an alarm clock, no problem, right? Your melatonin, genetically speaking, probably turned off at about 5 a.m., okay? And then you slowly kind of woke up. You're a night owl like me, my melatonin doesn't turn off until like 6:30, 7 o'clock. So it takes me much longer. So when you're upset at your kid who's saying, Dad, I want to stay in bed longer when they're a teenager, it's because they're shifted later. They're night owls when a lot of us are early birds. This becomes important because once you wake up, all of your hormones are incredibly predictable. I can tell you exactly when your cortisol will be high, when your melatonin will be low. All of these things are very predictable based on the genetics of when it starts, which is your chronotype. So now it's like the key that unlocks the freaking universe, okay? This is where it gets really cool. So we know naturally when some hormones will be at high points, and so then we do the activities that we need those hormones for at those high points.
Right.
But it's going to be different if you're an early bird than if you're a night owl. So sometimes things get a little off. Now, I'll be fair with you. The biggest question that I get asked about this has to do with intimacy, right? So
let's just get right. Let's get right into the
the point, okay? Right? When's the best time to have sex, Dr. Breus? Okay, let's rock and roll straight through this. All right. So generally speaking, you need 5 hormones to have successful intimacy. You need estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, adrenaline, and cortisol all need to be high. Melatonin, the sleep hormone, needs to be low. So when we surveyed people, we discovered 73% of people like to be intimate sometime between 10 and 11:30 at night. Okay? Not a big surprise there. What do you think your hormone profile looks like at that point?
Do you mean in terms of,
is going to be high?
Well, that's what I was going to say. So like, I wonder why people... Is it just cultural? Like,
So that's hint number 1 as when is the best time to have sex. Hint number 2 is if you're going to be intimate with somebody who is of the male gender, what do most men wake up with in the morning? An erection. If that is not Mother Nature telling you when to use that thing, I don't know what is, right?
You know, it's funny. We just had a breathing expert on. A gentleman by the name of Patrick McCown.
Oh, he's a good one. He knows his stuff. I worked with Patrick tangentially with Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese.
Oh, awesome.
He does some good stuff with them, I believe, on there. They have an app called XPT, and I think he does the breath work on them. I
was just introduced to that. And then I just found out about like Laird Hamilton's, like their getaway in Costa Rica. And
I did it.
Ran to my bank account and I was like, can I afford this?
Dude,
you've done it. How is it?
I was a participant.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I lectured on sleep, and then Gabby and Laird let me stay and do the whole program.
Oh, how cool.
It was amazing.
I mean, that's got to be a pretty cool couple to be, friends with.
Honestly,
like
they are the coolest. Like, there's nothing that's not cool about either one of them in any way, shape, or form.
Awesome.
At all.
That's amazing. Yes. Well, but it's funny, like to bring this back to what you were saying, again, the breathing thing is part of my journey to better quality sleep and just,
Mhm.
and then we talked about James Nestor's book after that a little bit. That might have actually been after the show. Our listeners are like, I didn't hear about that. But that was one of the things he said. He's like, look, and also a byproduct of breathing properly throughout the night after a good night's sleep, like a man should wake up with an erection.
Absolutely. 100%.
And so now I'm like, that's one of my measuring sticks, to use a terrible pun,
right.
To tell if, I had a good night's sleep. So yeah, it's just so funny that it's,
right.
two conversations that's coming back around.
So then you're going to say to me, okay, Michael, that's a general idea.
Right.
But what happens if my partner's a night owl and I'm an early bird? Right? What are we going to do then? The good news is if you go and you buy the book, you will learn that I created matrices. So I actually have matrices. So you can put your chronotype on one side, your partner's chronotype on the other, and I give you an early evening time and an early morning time. When we surveyed, it was kind of interesting. We also did a survey of men versus women, and it was looking at desire and like when were you most interested. This is going to sound ridiculous, but this is real data. Yeah. Men could care less. Whenever it was offered, they were interested.
I do remember hearing that.
Women were more along chronotypical guidelines. So if you were an early bird, you preferred intimacy either in the early morning or the early evening. If you were a night owl, you preferred it late at night or in the later afternoon, things like that. So it kind of falls along the lines of what you might expect it would be, kind of generally speaking. But you can also learn a lot about things like when to go for a run, when to work out, when to do yoga, when to play a team sport. Like so we really broke it down only based on the research now. We've got over 220 studies in the book. To be clear, not my studies. These are studies that are being done on chronobiology all over the world. I just kind of culminated it all together in a package that kind of works. And then we moved on to Energize, right? And so once I figured out all this chronotype stuff, Stacy came to me talking about exercise, and I was like, okay, let's kind of figure this out. Now, in the interim between the Power of When and Energize, I had become an intermittent faster, much the way you just had talked about becoming an intermittent faster.
Yeah.
And one of the things I discovered, and I talk about my intermittent fasting journey in the book, I was, yes, the crazy person who said, I'm going to eat a pint of ice cream every single day for 30 days, but only eat it in my subscribed period of time. And to be clear, I did not gain a pound during that period of time. I almost died from the dairy.
Well, it's funny. Anyone who, and I guess, the one thing that I've learned doing the show is it really comes down to the individual. But, my wife had naturally been intermittent fasting. And for years I'd be like, oh, you need to eat breakfast. And then I was like, you know what, let me give it a shot. I couldn't believe the difference that it made in terms of my energy, but also to your point, I'm not a person who's like, I'm going to subscribe to this like very rigid structured diet.
Right.
I love that it gives, to your point, like you were eating ice cream every day, I think for 30 days, didn't lose weight, but you also didn't gain weight. So it's like just that the power again of when makes such a big difference. And I'm fascinated by it.
So what happened is when I was doing this intermittent fasting, I started to fade because I'm a wolf. So I can't eat in the morning. Honestly, if I try to eat, I'll puke. Like it's happened many, many times. It's like, I know it's very predictable. So I'm like, I'm not going to eat this morning. And everybody kind of gets it because I'm a night owl and my whole metabolism is shifted that way. Right. So when you start to think about that, I was like, well, maybe it should be that way for everybody. So I started kind of talking with people about it. And so in the book, we actually give you guidelines based on your chronotype of how long you should be fasting for, and also based on something called your body type. So as the story goes, when I was talking to Stacy, I was like, well, we were trying to come up with a movement program. And I said, well, how do you determine what exercises that you have people do? And she says, well, I look at their bodies and I can tell you what they can and cannot do. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? She said, well, look, if I've got somebody that's long and lean, like I'm not going to have them do weights. I know that they're going to be better at cardio. So I might start them out running a mile. Whereas if I've got somebody who's kind of on the heavier side, if I stick them on the treadmill, they're never going to come back. She's
Right.
like, so I have to motivate people with exercises I know they can complete and get that kind of motivational positivity from to continue them going on their path. And I said, are you using body type? And so we started thinking about it. So if you remember back to high school, right, there was endomorph, mesomorph, ectomorph. So we started looking at the literature and kind of looking at the research, and we figured out, well, okay, now we've got a little bit bigger and better understanding of when people should intermittent fast, and for how long. So it turns out that body type is based on metabolism. So long and lean people, guess what? They have a really fast metabolism.
Right.
People who are mesomorphs have a medium metabolism because their shoulders are kind of wider than their waist and the meat just kind of hangs on the skeleton that way. And then the endomorphs, they have a slower metabolism because they got more weight on them, right?
Right.
So it kind of breaks down to that. So then we're like, oh, okay. That seems pretty simple. So then let's create a guide point for intermittent fasting. So as you know, there's not really a whole lot of people saying start here, right? And so what this book does that I'm really proud of is not only do we tell you what time of day you should intermittent fast, again, based on your chronotype, which is based on the chronotype of your metabolism, but based on your body type, we can tell you how long to fast for. So if you're a long and lean person, you're going to fast for 12 hours and you're going to feed for 12 hours because we don't want you to lose weight, but we also don't want you to gain any weight. Right. If you're a mesomorph, right, we're going to change that and we're going to say we want you to feed for 10 hours, fast for 14 hours. See what I did there? I moved it by about 4 hours.
Yeah.
If you're an endomorph, a little bit on the bigger side who wants to lose weight, well, then you're going to fast for 16 hours, feed for 8 hours, right?
Yeah.
At least you've got a starting point.
Right.
So that way, because a lot of people, they're like, well, I'm big, so maybe I should just only eat for 4 hours a day. No, don't do that, right? And also, I want to be clear about one other thing while we're talking about intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
Is if you have an eating disorder or you have body dysmorphia disorder, this is not something that you should be doing, period, end of story.
Yeah.
You and your doctor are working therapeutically with you, and I don't want you to take any chances with something like that. So intermittent fasting is not a technique that I recommend for my patients with eating disorders or body dysmorphia disorders. But everything else that's in the book is completely applicable to you, along with the sleep and the movement and all that kind of good fun stuff. But I just want to be clear, it's not safe for people with those situations to be trying intermittent fasting unsupervised.
Yeah, no, and that's a great call out. And something that I found really interesting about just kind of my own psychology, and I think this is maybe indicative of just how many people go through life. I hadn't thought about like my body type in those terms, honestly, maybe ever, because I didn't have a compelling reason to. Right. I've actually, someone asked me that after I started doing the podcast. They're like, "Hey, are you a mesomorph?" Or I was like, "Am I a what?"
You are a mesomorph, by the way.
Yeah, I figured that out. Yeah, because I did the test. Right. Well, but here's what I want to tell you that I thought I bet a lot of people relate to, and this kind of comes back to the stigma of sleeping in late versus being an early riser. Right. It's like, as you gave the initial introduction, I believe it was like a lion, a bear, a wolf, a dolphin, as you described them, I was like, oh man, I really hope I fit into that category. And then as you were describing the body type, and again, I didn't even really remember what was up. I was like, oh, I hope I fit into that category. Right. And it just kind of, as you started actually explaining what everything was, and I just kind of got reminded of the purpose of the book was, it's not to fit into this, what you think is the best option. Exactly. It's to understand like what you actually are, so you can optimize your life, really. Exactly. And it was just a little bit of like an aha. And I had a pretty good sense of kind of where I felt. Like I'm on the lion side of things, and especially as I get older, which I believe is typical. It is. You start to walk backwards. I used to be a wolf to the nth degree. And now I'm finding myself getting sleepy at 10:30. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Well, but the other thought that I had too was, it really feels like, and I guess it's like socially, culturally, people on the night owl side of the spectrum, like, are really at a disadvantage. Yeah. Well, I was my whole life, honestly. Like,
I mean, number one, early morning education was horrible for me. Usually is for wolves. And I mean, teenagers in general hate mornings to begin with, but it was just only worse when I got to college. And a lot of people think of wolves as lazy because they don't rise with the dawn and, work out at 6 and, all of those kind of things. We have a very interesting personality profile. We have a tendency to be very creative. A lot of my artists, my actors have a tendency to be wolves, but yet my athletes have a tendency to be lions. Those, alpha go-getters, kind of jumping up early in the morning type of folks. I'm not saying you can't be an athlete and be a night owl, but at the same time, it's less likely for sure.
Well, and I wonder too, gosh, what was it? Malcolm Gladwell's, is it Tipping Point or no, it's Outliers.
Yep.
It's the example in my mind of that hockey team and the way that they signed up for hockey. It's like all the kids with birthdays at the beginning of the year were, 9, 10, 11 months older than the other kids they were competing with at a time period where like that difference is so
it's massive,
monumental. And so it's like, of course, the older kids, they look like the better athlete. They look more coordinated. They get different coaching. And it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And to your point, like with school, it's kind of like, or maybe even athletics, because like we always had to be up early training. Like I played football in college. And I mean, a big portion of the year was before 7 o'clock.
Right.
And so it's like, man, like how many of those guys who did have that other chronotype could, just physically weren't able to perform at that time of day. And like, how did that hold them back?
Yeah. So it's like they were jet lagged every practice. So it would be like they flew in from Paris and walked onto the field. That's how they're feeling. And they were probably still performing at unbelievable levels. Here's the crazy part is if we had known at the time what we know now, I could actually you could manipulate somebody's circadian rhythm so that you could get them to be on that rhythm. So I could take a night owl using light therapy and melatonin, and I could shift them so that they could do those practices and perform well. And I mean, and as an example, I do this with some of my artists. So I treat a DJ, his name is Steve Aoki. And Steve is crazy, but he doesn't go on stage until 11:30 at night. So it's like I've got a shift worker on my hands, right?
Yeah.
And the guy's got to have energy like he's a nut, And so so he's napping literally right up until we know what his chronotype is, so we can manipulate all of those things to allow him to be able to perform when he wants to be able to perform. And you can do that, for a subscribed period of time and be okay with it. You can't do it forever.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like I'm a fan of, I love sports, but as an example, I do enjoy watching the UFC and boxing. But the thing that I always think about is I'm like, these guys, the title fight sometimes isn't until midnight.
Yep.
And now, like having, again, talked to different folks about sleep and like circadian rhythm, I'm just like, gosh, that's got to be so difficult for some of these guys to do that.
So in that instance, the night owls would have an advantage because they'd be fighting at night. There's some clear data looking at performance, and it can go by sport, but basically it follows chronotypical guidelines. So if you like to wake up early, you're going to compete best early. If you're a bear, you're going to compete best mid-afternoon. If you're a wolf, you're going to compete better in the evening times. So that comes into play at things like the Olympics, right? Where you've got jet lag, you've got different food schedule, and you've got, evening events, morning events, rotating back and forth, especially in track and field, which is where you see, just you got people playing multiple events that are at different times. Like it's crazy. So, there's a lot to coordinate on that. Like the Olympic team has their own sleep specialist that works with them all the time. Like it makes sense,
I was going to ask you that, like, at the highest level of sport, what percentage, I don't know, that's probably a tough question to ask, but are there a lot of athletes at the highest level who are, looking at their sleep this closely? Like, are professional teams assessing guys by chronotype and be like, hey, we have a 10 p.m. game against Liverpool, and like this guy's a
No,
a
so
morning
I would
person.
argue that nobody's drilling down at that level. However, what I can tell you is that rookies, they don't seem to give a shit, right? Because they're young, they're balls to the wall, they're doing their thing. When players get into the mid range of their career and they realize, I got to extend this, like I've got my shelf life has got to go longer and harder. That's when we really see people come in and they're like, okay, Michael, how do we dial this in? How do we make me, and also injury and recovery from injury, sleep is massive for that. So when we're talking about an injured player, then they really get interested in sleep. So it really just depends upon where you are in your career, what kind of sport you're in, and kind of professionally what level you're in. And the same holds true for the weekend warrior, as well. It's just we have to be kind of consistent in understanding sort of what are your sleep needs, are they being met, and then will you perform at the level at which you want to perform?
Yeah. Well, something that I wanted to ask you too is, let me think about this. I just lost my train of thought here, but understanding that here's where I want to go with this pre-pandemic, right? And I was I'm a lion mesomorph is like what I did. And those tests were actually really helpful because I did have some questions as to where I fell. Yeah. But out of sheer necessity, I'm out here on the East Coast and I used to commute into New York City. So for me to make that happen, my only opportunity to work out was really early in the morning, like 5:30. And fortunately, I'm more predisposed to be able to do that. But it was like I kind of had a confined window where I could get something like that done.
Sure. One
of the interesting things that's kind of come out of the pandemic and the ability to work from home, and I kind of had this epiphany this year. So I was like, wait a second, I've kind of continued to work out super early at that time out of habit. I was like, but maybe is there a better way for me to align all this up and stack this throughout my day?
100%.
Yeah. So maybe,
So here's the deal.
Talk about that thought process.
Is the pandemic has been the biggest sleep experiment that's ever been done, right? So and everybody messed it up. So what you should have done is you should have said, what's my chronotype? I no longer have to drive to work. I'm going to go to sleep and wake up based on that. Because let's be honest, most people were rolling out of bed, throwing on a ball cap and getting on Zoom, right? I mean, like that's how work got done in the beginning of the pandemic up until just fairly recently. That's really kind of what we were seeing. And so like you had a lot more leeway in your morning schedule. And so if you were a wolf, you could actually sleep later, wake up at a more time that was more consistent with your chronotype and still be valuable at work. If you're a lion, you can still wake up early, get your morning workout in. So it was unfortunate that very few people during the pandemic actually took advantage of the flexibility of the schedule to follow their chronotypes. But several did. I mean, the ones who were listening to me, because I was screaming it from the mountaintops, really felt like they could lock into a schedule that worked out a lot better for them. They saw higher levels of productivity, things of that nature.
Well, and what's been so interesting for me too, I would count myself in the camp of I generally eat pretty healthy. I try to get good sleep. I work out consistently, but I just found that, I was one of those people where like I was drinking more and more coffee. Like I was more and more tired, and I had the afternoon meeting. I had a big lunch, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm getting drowsy."
Right.
And that's when I was kind of like, "There's got to be a better way to do this." And at the time, I didn't want to switch my workout because there's no chance of me fasting in any capacity if I'm working out in the morning. Like for me, I'll shake. I just can't do it. But to your point, like having the opportunity now to kind of restructure my day, what I've noticed is even on nights where I don't get good sleep, like last night, unfortunately, was one of those nights. By doing the intermittent fasting and working out at a different point in the day, I don't crash.
Yeah, you can push your energy in different directions. So one of the big secrets that we learned one of the secrets we learned with lions, which is what you're illustrating, is if we have them move their workout to later in the day, they can make dinner and a movie no problem, right? So big problem for lions is you're waking up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. You want to be in bed at 9 o'clock. You certainly don't want to be out partying with your friends. So what I do is I have you take your morning workout, put it at 6 o'clock and work out from 6 to like 7:15, shower and meet your friends out, you'll be able to stay up until 11 o'clock without being super fatigued.
Yeah. Well, and you know, one of the things that I loved about your book, and I wrote it down, you called it at some point the cycle of energy.
Yes.
How it's like all, you know, these different factors kind of feed off each other. It's like you need to do the proper things throughout the day to get good sleep. You also need good sleep to that. So it's like, you know,
it really works with in conjunction with each other. The biggest thing I think that Energize kind of brought forward, which was largely from Stacy, was the movement section that we've got. So I want to be clear with folks, like there's a difference between movement and exercise, right? So exercise is not what this book is about. Stacy is amazing at exercise. That's her, you know, thing. This is a book about keeping your energy level consistent by keeping your body moving consistently. So what I always say is sitting is this new smoking, right? So, and when we sit, we get inflammation. When we get inflammation, we stiffen up. It feels like crap. Like we've got to keep everything kind of moving. So what we did was we said 5 times a day, we're going to ask you to move a little bit. Now, to be fair, back up just a little bit. Very few people show up on my doorstep and they say, Michael, I've got too much energy. I'm doing too great. Like, you got to slow me down. Like, that rarely happens. Most of the time people say, Michael, I'm exhausted. I can't do. So what I say to them is I say, when? And they're usually not very good at telling me when. They're like, well, I'm always exhausted. I'm like, do you wake up exhausted? Yeah. Are you exhausted every minute of every day? No, probably not. So what I did was I said, I want you to measure, to give you a scale, 0 to 10, right?
Yeah,
so
I thought this was really interesting.
Right. So we use something called the RPE, which is the Perceived Exertion Scale by Gunter. This is a scale that's been used in exercise physiology for like a gazillion years, but it's about effort, right? And how much effort is it taking you? So we have people measure their energy after they wake up, before lunch, after lunch, before dinner, and before bed.
Yeah.
So what we do is we're gauging or taking a diary reading of your energy, because look, if we figure out, hey, you actually do have energy in the morning time, but you only have it until 11, and then you have a lull, then you seem to pick things back up, and then you have another lull from 2 to 3. Well, now we can start to identify what type of energy are you missing. So it turns out there's 5 different types of energy. So there's food, right? There's resting energy, which includes naps, sleep, as well as just rest. There's moving energy, there's emotional energy, and there's spiritual energy. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. We didn't put spiritual energy in the book because you could just write an entire book about spiritual energy. And I am not a spiritual energy expert. So it didn't make any sense for me to be writing about that.
Yeah, stick to what you know.
I am sticking to what I know, brother. So we have people measuring their energy, identifying the types of energy, and then we give people a solution for each type of energy drain, is what we call. So the way the formula works is you'll have high consistent energy if your energy gains outweigh your energy drains, right? So let me give you some examples of some energy drains and how.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask you this. This is perfect.
Okay. So I'm going to give you an emotional energy drain. This is one of my favorite ones. Okay. Yeah. Do you have somebody in your life, you don't have to tell me who every time you talk to them, they suck the life out of you?
Who, me?
Right.
Yeah.
We all have at least one person in our lives like that, right? Now. So first of all, I want to be very clear about something. There are some people that are just energy vampires, right? They just walk around and they just suck the lifeblood out of you. There are also some people that, just to be very a little serious for just a second, who are going through a hard time. Sure. And they need your help. I'm not talking about those people, okay? I'm not talking about your best friend who's going through something. Now, your best friend might be an energy vampire as well, but that's a whole nother story, okay?
We got to work through that at a different podcast.
Right. So what is an energy vampire, and how do you thwart one of these people? So actually, my son taught me an easy way to help with this. Music, right? So in our home, music is a big deal. My son is a musician, and we used to have a terrible time waking him up for school, for high school. Yeah. He was awful. I mean, he would do we'd have yelling. I'm the freaking sleep doctor, right? Like, it was horrible. And we're yelling and we're screaming. So finally one day I said, Cooper, here's what we're going to do. You have to wake up at 6:55, and exactly at 7 a.m., you get to be the morning DJ. You can put whatever music on you want at whatever volume you want. It turns on at 7, and you are the DJ for the morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it.
My daughter wanted to be Tuesdays and Thursdays. Cooper was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We had so much freaking fun every morning. It was great. So the first morning, my son pops in. So we're a throwback family. So he starts playing You Have to Fight for Your Right to Party by the Beastie Boys at volume 10 at 7. Like, it's the best. So what we did was we changed the energetic profile of the situation, right? So as a parent, you can appreciate if you can when shit starts to go bad, it goes bad fast. But you know exactly what I'm saying.
I'm laughing because it's so painfully true.
Right. So, but if you can change energetically by something as simple as playing everybody's favorite piece of music. I mean, think about it. When somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're pissed off and your favorite song comes on the radio, you start bopping around and it changes exactly your mood of where you're at, right? So yeah, it's very possible is the point.
And something that I took away from your book too, and I took this away from talking, like, you know, we brought up Patrick McCown. Yeah. There's all of these little, I kind of think about it in my head as like a tool, and it's, sure. You know, maybe that's a very transactional way to think about music. But, you know, for me now, like, I'm very conscious of when I'm working and I have to write and I need to get myself focused. Like, there's a certain type of music, and now there's just a certain album I always go to. Right. And but you're right. Like, it's an incredible tool that you can use to change your emotional and physical state. Like, it's incredible. And that's something that I liked about this book is like, now it's like, oh, wow, you can do that for energy as well.
Right. So then I started to explore things to go a little bit on a deeper emotional side. And so another way that you can deal with emotional vampires is with kindness. Yeah. Right. So this was a very interesting idea, right? Is sometimes if just the act of being kind and getting outside of yourself really can help change you energetically, whether you're feeling down or blue about something that's going on for you, or you've had one of these people in your life that has kind of sucked the life out of you. Right. But it's so important to understand the idea of service and kindness and being like community and outside yourself. The data on it is staggering. Like, it's not like I'm some woo-woo guy who's like, oh, we should all be freaking kind. Like, there's data here. Like, it is. And again, I'm very transactional. I'm fine with it being a tool. Understanding how to utilize these tools doesn't mean that they're not special, important, and aren't amazing. It's just a word that we're going to use to classify them to know how to use them, right? So there's lots of different ways to do that. Movement also turns out to be an incredible energy changer. So by taking these 5 times when we're looking at people's energy, we flip the script on people. So in chapter number 3, we say, now that you've been tracking your energy, we want you to take those same times, and we're going to give you movements based on your chronotype and your body type that you'll be able to successfully do and change your energetic profile or keep your energetic profile consistent. So first one is a stretch, which kind of makes sense, right? You've been sleeping. We're having you do this after your morning, whatever. So we want to, kind of stretch it out type of thing. I do my stretch while I'm brushing my teeth. Okay. I'm very efficient. I'm getting stuff done.
Imagine you with a toothbrush and doing the splits.
I do like squats. Like, it just kind of depends on which one I want to do. And I don't want to make up too much noise because I get up earlier than my wife, and my dogs are in the bathroom with me. And then
I know that. I know that struggle.
I'll tell you the whole story later.
The tiptoe silent morning routine is one I know all too well.
Exactly. So then the second one is a shake. So literally shaking your arms or shaking your legs. So I don't know if you have any animals, but if you ever see an animal when they get up, they do that crazy shaky thing. Like, I just did it and it feels energetic. Like, it's just like, you can actually change that changes this energetic profile, kind of shakes it off. Yeah. The third one is a bounce. So it's literally jumping up and down. It can be skipping rope. It could be doing jumping jacks. Again, I want to be clear. This is not to the point of sweating. This is the goal here is not exercise.
Right.
The goal is movement in a gentle form and fashion, just to wake up your musculature and remind everybody that they're still there. The fourth one is a build. This is going to use a major muscle group. So I might maybe a push-up, maybe a few sit-ups, maybe some deep knee bends. Again, we want to, wake up the bigger muscle groups just so that they don't kind of, tighten up and stiffen up. And then the final one is a balance. I like the balance at the end. That's my personal favorite, because when I'm doing it, like if I'm doing like a tree pose or whatever, like I can't think of anything else because I'm concentrating so hard on trying to balance.
Right. A little bit of like mindfulness.
Right. You want to pull those thoughts out of your head towards the end of the evening. So that's the book. It's got the three components. It's got the sleep component based on chronotypes, the intermittent fasting based on body type and chronotype, and then the movement, which is also based on body type and chronotype. And so what we've discovered, which has been really freaking cool, is when people do this for like 30 days, it's like, boom, no more need for coffee.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Yeah. Cause I'm trying to remember when it came out. Maybe it was like August but I was curious to hear like, what has the feedback been? Obviously it's fun because, I'm going to try a lot of this stuff, but I was already trying some of these things just by sheer coincidence. It's made a tremendous impact in my own energy. But I was very curious to hear, like, what has the reception been like?
We've really gotten some amazing responses. People write us all the time and they're like, I've never had this much energy. And, we had one person, and this is not, I want to preface this by saying, don't do this, but said, I had so much energy, I stopped taking my antidepressant medication.
Right.
So we wrote her back, please talk to your doctor
before
you do something like, I'm stoked that you're doing well, but that's not the intent of the book. So, things like that. But we had some really great responses to it. And it's actually been very, very positive. It's funny to see which different aspects people key into and which ones they like a lot. Like the emotional energy has been one that's been lots of podcasts have asked me questions about that, because you don't hear about people thinking about like, how do I change my energy, emotionally? And is that important to think about? You're damn right. It's important to think about it. So I think that's been kind of a fun area. And then of course the movement section that Stacy developed, I really find to be fun. And I actually do it myself.
Yeah.
And it works.
No, that's great. Well, it's something that I was thinking, with the movement too, it's funny. It's like the more, I don't know, what's the word? Evolved, civilized, like the more that like technology makes our life easier, we get away from doing things that we would just naturally would have done.
Right.
Like we naturally just would have been like walking around. We naturally would have been bending, and we naturally but like now it's like you can sit at the comfort of your own desk and, go the entire day without moving. And it's like, of course you don't have any energy when you think about it. No. It's like, I'm not using my body.
Well, so I also think that that's one of the reasons. I don't know if you've heard these statistics, but caffeine consumption is up 18% during the pandemic.
Oh God, I believe it. Yeah.
Right. And it makes sense because all people are sitting there on the Zoom the whole time. So it's like, we really want, and also, we want people to take the book and do the exercises outside, in the fresh air, like get some sunlight, like that's all open. Like, please go do that. That would be great.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed that too. Well, we're coming up on time here. There's a couple questions I wanted to ask you.
Fire away.
I'm big on low hanging fruit. What is it? Pareto's principle, the 20% that makes 80% of the gain, whatever. The biggest energy detractors, like if you were to tell people like, hey, like 2 to 3 things that you could change in your daily routine that are just for most people, huge energy sucks. Like what would those things be?
So I think number one, I think fuel is important. Like if you don't understand like what your body requires, like what are your macros, like how does that work for you? I think you are at a huge disadvantage if you want to try to maintain a decent level of energy.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to really dial in your fuel and understand what your body does best. I think that's number one.
Okay.
For being able to maintain levels of energy. Number 2, you got to get good sleep. What I mean by good sleep is, and it can be very simple, just wake up at the same time 7 days a week. If that's all you did based on your chronotype, we're good. Okay. Because what that'll do is that'll make a lot of things fall into place, right? So get your food right, meaning evaluate what your body needs. And if you need supplementation, get your supplementation. Make sure that you're eating, get your protein in there. That's the only way it's going to work is if you have protein. And you can't have a no carb diet. Carbs are not the devil, I promise. Right. So if you can lock your sleep in by waking up at the same time every single day, getting your food right. I think the third thing is, and I learned this from, of all people, you might be too young to know who this is, Tony Horton. Do you know who Tony Horton is?
Yeah. Why do I know that name?
Tony Horton created a program called P90X.
Yeah. Oh, right? I know P90X. Yep.
and so I had the good fortune of asking Tony a question at a lecture that he was giving, and he and I had become friendly. And so I said, Tony, and by the way, he's rock freaking solid. Like if you see him today, like he could kick your ass.
He's ripped up. Okay.
It's unbelievable. And so I'm
awesome.
like, and so I said to him, I said, Tony, I'm also like you, the 80-20 kind of thing. How many days a week do I need to exercise? And he said, Michael, how many days a week do you need to eat and sleep? I was like, got it. So that's number 3 is you got to move. You got to move your body. You don't have to do exercise. You don't have to be Tony Horton, but you got to move your body. The more sedentary you are, the more likely you are to gain weight. The more likely you gain weight, the more likely you have sleep apnea. You end up with a sleep disorder. Life sucks if you've got that. So let's avoid that altogether. Make sure you got good food, good sleep, and good movement. That's it.
I love it. Well, and sincerely, I hope people check out the book. I really enjoyed it. And I think, something that's nice is you give very, you give prescriptive steps that you can take. And, it's like, hey, look, try this. And then you can always modify. But like based on, your body type, your chronotype, here's what you can do. Here's the logic behind it, which I really enjoyed. But, and something that you just said with regards to nutrition, it's like, it really is incumbent upon the individual to take the time to try and figure this out. And I understand it's difficult and there's so much there's so much conflicting information.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you said, even if someone was like, oh, you know what? I am going to try intermittent fasting. I mean, you search intermittent fasting.
Oh,
you're like, oh shit, which is the right way to do it? There's a million different things. So I did enjoy the fact that, to your point, and I think this is how we started the show, like you gave people a place to start from.
Yeah, 100%.
Which I think is honestly what most people just need.
Yeah,
a lot of people want to feel better. They want to be more 100%. Emotionally stable. They want to have more energy, but they're like, where do I begin? And that's why I thought this book was really great.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't mind being prescriptive, right? Like I don't mind telling people what to do. I really don't, because
it's great.
To be very fair with you, my shit works. I know it does because I don't say anything that's not backed by data or my own clinical experience working with patients. So, every single thing I say is not going to work for every single person because life doesn't work that way. But, the things that I'm telling you really do have a lot of data behind them. They really are a great place to start. And I think it helps guide people through all the misinformation. And if you know where to start and you read the book, you learn about intermittent fasting. We also have resources in the book as well. And so every chapter has got all of the websites that we've worked with. It's got all of the research that was done on PubMed. So we really lock it in for you so that you can not only hear my opinion, but read the resources from which my opinion comes and see if you agree with me. You may not, but chances are you probably will, because I've been doing this for a while and I know how to read research, right? So.
Yeah. Well, perfect. Well, I know there's a lot of different outlets that people can follow you with, but where should we point people to?
So the best place to go is my website, thesleepdoctor.com. You can follow me on social. I have the same handle on all my social media, which is The Sleep Doctor. So
Perfect.
On Twitter,
a great piece of branding, by the way.
Isn't it great?
Got to the spot early. I love it. Yeah, it's
perfect. It was it's a great story. I'll tell you someday. But I've had the Sleep Doctor now for north of almost 18 years.
Oh wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I mean it's so good.
awesome.
I'm telling you, my 7-year-old. We have a babysitter here right now
Huh?
because my wife's on vacation, living her own life. And she's like, oh, my dad has to go talk to the sleep doctor right now. And I'm like, you remember? I'm like, God, like it's stuck.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Well, it's great because everybody knows exactly what I do the second I say it, right?
Yep.
And it's like there's no ambiguity. It's like, and I am a sleep doctor. I'm not just playing one on TV, so that works out well as well.
Yeah, that also helps. A little bit of credibility goes a long way.
That kind of thing. But I have to be honest with you, dude. I'm super fortunate. I started studying a topic that not a lot of people were interested in 23 years ago. And it turns out sleep is one of the most important things you could ever possibly learn about. And I'm enough of a ham that I like to get on podcasts and talk about it and have a good time and have a good conversation. So I just want to say thank you for you and your audience for having me. And yeah, if people want to follow, we're always around and about. Do yourself a favor, take the chrono quiz. I think that would be probably the most fun thing that you could do, or go to the book, Energize, go to the website, Energize myself, and you can take the quiz right there.
Yeah. I'm just taking a note. I'm going to make sure we link to that. Well, perfect.
Yeah, throw it in the show notes.
Yeah, we will. Well, thank you. This was awesome. And we'll certainly have to have you back again. It sounds like there's some stories we left on the table.
Absolutely. Always happy to come back and share more. Thanks for having me. Dr. Michael Breus, wishing everybody out there sweet dreams.
Awesome. Thank you.